Welcome, I am Daisy, your hostess. In this video, by request, we are traveling back to ancient Greece, circa 200, maybe 150 BC or thereabouts. As we step back in time, things appear different for sure. No chemtrails and no electric poles and wires. As we look around, we see an agrarian society with city-states scattered across the Greek peninsula, where people live in close proximity to nature, often facing dangers from mythical creatures and relying on the gods for guidance. The chariot has dropped us off here at the open-air theater of Athens, Greece, where soon the poet Apollodorus will recite the exploits of Hercules, who is better known to others as Heracles. They say that prior to that, he was known as Alcides, essentially a patronymic derived from his mother's name, Alcmene, and the Greek word alke means strength, which reflects Hercules' legendary power in Greek mythology. Yet, after certain things came to light, in an attempt to appease Hera, Zeus' wife, which we'll learn more about, Heracles was named after her, after Hera, the queen of the gods, because she was his lifelong enemy. The name Heracles translates to Hera's glory. Interesting that they would call it Hera's glory. You'll find out we should change it to something else. But either way, I want to know what caused Hera so much enmity towards Hercules. We'll have the answers to that question. We learned from some of the town folks here, you know how people like to gossip, that Hercules was seeking atonement for the crime of murdering his wife, children, and the children of Iphicles, his twin brother. And this atonement would gain him a return to the Peloponnesian city of Tiryns. They said that Hera, the wife of Zeus, had a hand in driving Hercules into temporary madness, which caused him to lose his mind and partake in such horrific atrocities. Why would she do that? Well, whether myth or distorted history, these ancient texts provide us a sense of the culture, the mindset of the people, and other nuances of the time period, such as the instances, as you'll notice in several sections of this poem, mentioning courts and laws, the science of herbalism in the creation of medicine, the use of poison for anointing arrowheads for warfare, the art of music, the worship of gods and rituals such as the initiation and ceremonies of the mysteries. What were these mysteries about? It appears to me that there is a need, or there was a need, for law and order, not much different than today. And I get the sense that there is some type of judicial system in place where if there is a crime, the king is not the one that issues the penalty, but that the king sends the offender to a priestess in a temple who then dishes out the fine or the penalty, which once performed is then reported back in front of the king, who then absolves and sets you free, or whatever needs to be done. So we see the working of two institutions, which are that of law and the other of religion, both working together, yet separately, to bring a sense of civility. I don't know if you'll pick up on that, but I did. One seems to have power over land, while the other uses otherworldly power to subjugate the animal spirit in man. Well, that's my working theory. You know, I'm just making small talk here while we wait and enjoy the lovely music floating in the air. Does that sound like they're playing the lyre? Doesn't it? Ah, can you smell that in the air? That smoke of incense. It's putting us in rapport with the gods. Seems like it will be a few minutes before the festivities begin. Well, before Apollodorus begins his oration, let me tell you a little bit about the main character, Hercules. It is said that the mortal woman, Alcmene, daughter of King Electreon of Mycenae, granddaughter of the hero Perseus, and wife of Amphitryon, she had an affair with Zeus, the king of the gods, and from that union begot Hercules. She was most innocent, of course, because Zeus covered his identity from her and had disguised himself as her husband, Amphitryon, and had his way with her. I know you're probably thinking, what kind of god does such a thing? I don't know either. Maybe the gods were trying to populate the earth. Who knows the mind of gods? We're just mere mortals. Hera, Zeus' wife, learns about Zeus' affair with Alcmene through the whispers and gossip of the gods and mortals, as well as her own divine intuition. When it was close to time for Alcmene to give birth to the son of Zeus, the supreme god himself made a proclamation that a descendant of Perseus was to be born on a given day, and this boy would rule over Mycenae. Well, Hera heard the news, and greatly angered by her husband's infidelity, decided to use her husband's proclamation for her own, ends or revenge, because she had her own ideas of who she wanted to be ruler. And cunningly she began working behind the scenes to thwart Zeus' ambitions by delaying Alcmene's labor and having her candidate to bear Eurystheus prematurely. Call it magic of the gods or knowledge of herbs, but this Eurystheus' mom bore him prematurely at 7 months. So when Hercules grew up, he had to serve Eurystheus and also suffer the vengeful persecution of Hera. His first exploit was the strangling of 2 serpents that she had sent to kill him in his cradle. And this is where Apollodorus begins his story, which we can find in the Apollodorus Library, Book 2, translated from the Greek by J.G. Grazer. The 12 Labors of Hercules. But before Amphitryon reached Thebes, Zeus came by night, and prolonging the one night threefold, he assumed the likeness of Amphitryon and bedded with Alcmene, and related what had happened concerning the telebones. But when Amphitryon arrived and saw that he was not welcomed by his wife, he inquired the cause. When she told him that he had come the night before and slept with her, he learned from Tiresias how Zeus had enjoyed her. And Alcmene bore 2 sons, to wit, Hercules, whom she had by Zeus, and who was the elder by one night, and Iphicles, whom she had by Amphitryon. When the child was 8 months old, Hera desired the destruction of the babe, and sent 2 huge serpents to the bed. Alcmene called Amphitryon to her help, but Hercules arose and killed the serpents by strangling them with both his hands. However, Pherecydes says that it was Amphitryon who put the serpent in the bed, because he would know which of the 2 children was his, and that when Iphicles fled and Hercules stood his ground, he knew that Iphicles was begotten by his body. Hercules was taught to drive a chariot by Amphitryon, to wrestle by Autolycus, to shoot with the bow by EROTAS, to fence by Castor, and to play the lyre by Linus. This Linus was a brother of Orpheus. He came to Thebes and became a Theban, but was killed by Hercules with a blow of the lyre. For being struck by him, Hercules flew into a rage and slew him. When he was tried for murder, Hercules quoted a law of Rhadamanthus, who laid it down that whoever defends himself against a wrongful aggressor shall go free, and so he was acquitted. But fearing he might do the like again, Amphitryon sent him to the cattle farm, and there he was nurtured and outdid all in stature and strength. Even by the look of him it was plain that he was a son of Zeus, for his body measured 4 cubits, and he flashed a gleam of fire from his eyes, and he did not miss neither with the bow nor with the javelin. While he was with the herds and had reached his 18th year, he slew the lion of Cithaeron. Having first learned from EROTAS the art of archery, Hercules received a sword from Hermes, a bow and arrows from Apollo, a golden breastplate from Hephaestus, and a robe from Athena, for he had himself cut a club at Nemæan. Now it came to pass that after the battle with the Minyans, Hercules was driven mad through the jealousy of Hera, and flung his own children, whom he had by Megara, and 2 children of Iphicles, into the fire. Wherefore he condemned himself to exile, and was purified by Thespius. And repairing to Delphi, he inquired of the god where he should dwell. The Pythian priestess then first called him Hercules. For hitherto he was called Alcides, and she told him to dwell in Tiryns, serving Eurystheus for 12 years, and to perform the 10 labors imposed on him. And so, she said, when the tasks were accomplished, he would be immortal. The Nemæan Lion. By Juno's hated urged on, Alcmene's son, at 16 years his noble toils begun. Nemea's dreadful lion first he sought, the savage slew, and to Eurystheus brought. From his huge sides his shaggy spoils he tore, around him threw, and ever in triumph wore. When Hercules heard that, he went to Tiryns, and did as he was bid by Eurystheus. First, Eurystheus ordered him to bring the skin of the Nemæan lion. Now that was an invulnerable beast begotten by Typhon. On his way to attack the lion, he came to Cleone, and lodged at the house of a day laborer, Molorchus. And when his host would have offered a victim in sacrifice, Hercules told him to wait for 30 days, and then, if he had returned safe from the hunt, to sacrifice to Savior Zeus, but if he were dead, to sacrifice to him as to a hero. And having come to Nemea and tracked the lion, he first shot an arrow at him, but when he perceived that the beast was invulnerable, he heaved up his club and made after him. And when the lion took refuge in a cave with 2 mouths, Hercules built up the one entrance and came in upon the beast through the other, and putting his arm round its neck, held it tight till he had choked it. So laying it on his shoulders, he carried it to Cleone, and finding Molorchus on the last of the 30 days about to sacrifice the victim to him as to a dead man, he sacrificed to Savior Zeus and brought the lion to Mycenae. Amazed at his manhood, Eurystheus forbade him thenceforth to enter the city, but ordered him to exhibit the fruits of his labors before the gates. They say, too, that in his fear he had a bronze jar made for himself to hide in under the earth, and that he sent his commands for the labors through a herald, Cobrius, son of Pelops the Ilian. This Cobrius had killed Iphitus and fled to Mycenae, where he was purified by Eurystheus and took up his abode. The second labor, the Lernæan Hydra. On Lerna's pest the undaunted hero rushes, with massy club her 100 heads he crushes. In vain. One crushed, 2 missing heads arise, till good Iolaus to each wound applies the burning brand. Dipped in the Hydra's gall, his arrow's slightest wound is death to all. As a second labor, he ordered him to kill the Lernæan Hydra. That creature, bred in the swamp of Lerna, used to go forth into the plain and ravage both the cattle and the country. Now the Hydra had a huge body, with 9 heads, 8 mortal, but the middle one immortal. So mounting a chariot driven by Iolaus, he came to Lerna, and having halted his horses, he discovered the Hydra on a hill beside the springs of the Amymone, where was its den. By pelting it with fiery shafts, he forced it to come out, and in the act of doing so, he seized and held it fast. But the Hydra wound itself about one of his feet and clung to him, nor could he effect anything by smashing its head with his club, for as fast as one head was smashed, there grew up 2. A huge crab also came to the help of the Hydra by biting his foot. So he killed it, and in his turn called for help on Iolaus, who, by setting fire to a piece of the neighboring wood and burning the roots of the heads with the brands, prevented them from sprouting. Having thus got the better of the sprouting heads, he chopped off the immortal head and buried it, and put a heavy rock on it, beside the road that leads through Lerna to Eleos. But the body of the Hydra he split up and dipped his arrows in the gall. However, Eurystheus said that this labor should not be reckoned among the 10, because he had not got the better of the Hydra by himself, but with the help of Iolaus. The third labor, the capture of the stag. A stag with horns of gold and feet of brass. On Mænalæan bounds over the unbending grass. To die in sacred, this he's doomed to bring, unhurt, into the presence of the king. Forbid to wound, how take a stag so fleet? A 12 months' end scarce saw the task complete. As a third labor, he ordered him to bring the Cerinician hind alive to Mycenae. Now the hind was at Oni. It had golden horns and was sacred to Artemis. So wishing neither to kill nor wound it, Hercules hunted it a whole year. But when, weary with the chase, the beast took refuge on the mountain called Artemisius, and thence passed to the river Ladon, Hercules shot it just as it was about to cross the stream, and catching it, put it on his shoulders and hastened through Arcadia. But Artemis with Apollo met him, and would have wrested the hind from him, and rebuked him for attempting to kill her sacred animal. Howbeit, by pleading necessity and laying the blame on Eurystheus, he appeased the anger of the goddess and carried the beast alive to Mycenae. The fourth labor, the Erymanthian Boar. To Erymanthus next his course is bent, to seize the boar by incensed Dian sent. The fell destroyer bound he over him flings, and unto sacred Eurystheus quickly brings. The trembling tyrant shrinks aghast with dread, and in his brazen vessel hides his coward head. As a fourth labor, he ordered him to bring the Erymanthian boar alive. Now that animal ravaged sophists, sallying from a mountain which they called Erymanthus. So passing through Pholi, he was entertained by the centaur Pholus, a son of Silenus, by a Melian nymph. He set roast meat before Hercules, while he himself ate his meat raw. When Hercules called for wine, he said he feared to open the jar which belonged to the centaurs in common. But Hercules, bidding him be of good courage, opened it, and not long afterwards, scenting the smell, the centaurs arrived at the cave of Pholus, armed with rocks and furs. The first who dared to enter, Anchius and Agrius, were repelled by Hercules with a shower of brands, and the rest of them he shot and pursued as far as Malea. Thence they took refuge with Chiron, who, driven by the Lapiths from Mount Pelion, took up his abode at Malea. As the Centaurs cowered about Chiron, Hercules shot an arrow at them, which, passing through the arm of Elatus, stuck in the knee of Chiron. Distressed at this, Hercules ran up to him, drew out the shaft, and applied a medicine which Chiron gave him. But the hurt proving incurable, Chiron retired to the cave, and there he wished to die, but he could not, for he was immortal. However, Prometheus offered himself to Zeus to be immortal in his stead, and so Chiron died. The rest of the centaurs fled in different directions, and some came to Mount Malea, and Eurytion to Pholi, and Nessus to the river Evenus. The rest of them Poseidon received at Eleusis, and hid them in a mountain. But Pholus, drawing the arrow from a corpse, wondered that so little a thing could kill such big fellows. Howbeit, it slipped from his hand, and lighting on his foot, killed him on the spot. So when Hercules returned to Pholi, he beheld Pholus dead, and he buried him and proceeded to the boar hunt. And when he had chased the boar with shouts from a certain thicket, he drove the exhausted animal into deep snow, trapped it, and brought it to Mycenae. The fifth labor, the stables of Augeas. To cleanse the Augean stables now he's sped, where 30 years 3,000 oxen fed. The task for men too great. A river's course he turned, and through the stables urged its force. The tide resistless rolls, and in one day the gathered filth of years is swept away. The fifth labor he laid on him was to carry out the dung of the cattle of Augeas in a single day. Now Augeas was king of Elis. Some say that he was a son of the sun, others that he was a son of Poseidon, and others that he was a son of Phorbus, and he had many herds of cattle. Hercules accosted him, and without revealing the command of Eurystheus, said that he would carry out the dung in one day, if Augeas would give him the tithe of the cattle. Augeas was incredulous, but promised. Having taken Augeas' son Phyleus to witness, Hercules made a breach in the foundations of the cattle yard, and then, diverting the courses of the Alpheus and the Peneus, which flowed near each other, he turned them into the yard, having first made an outlet for the water through another opening. When Augeas learned that this had been accomplished at the command of Eurystheus, he would not pay the reward. Nay more, he denied that he had promised to pay it, and on that point he professed himself ready to submit to arbitration. The arbitrators having taken their seats, Phyleus was called by Hercules and bore witness against his father, affirming that he had agreed to give him a reward. In a rage, Augeas, before the voting took place, ordered both Phyleus and Hercules to pack out of Elis. So Phyleus went to Dulichium and dwelt there, and Hercules repaired to Dexamenus at Olenus. He found Dexamenus on the point of betrothing perforce his daughter Nesimache to the centaur Eurydion, and being called upon by him for help, he slew Eurydion when that centaur came to fetch his bride. But Eurystheus would not admit this labor either among the 10, alleging that it had been performed for hire. The sixth labor, the Stymphalides. The lake Stymphalides by his arm was freed from those dire birds on human flesh who feed. By Pallas' aid the dreadful race subdued, no more its banks with whitening bones are strewed. Honored by all mankind, he now returns, but still Eurystheus' envious hatred burns. The sixth labor he enjoined on him was to chase away the Stymphalian birds. Now at the city of Stymphalides in Arcadia was the lake called Stymphalian, embosomed in a deep wood. To it countless birds had flocked for refuge, fearing to be preyed upon by the wolves. So when Hercules was at a loss how to drive the birds from the wood, Athena gave him brazen castanets, which she had received from Hephaestus. By clashing these on a certain mountain that overhung the lake, he scared the birds. They could not abide the sound, but fluttered up in a fright, and in that way Hercules shot them. The seventh labor, the Cretan bull. A furious bull with nostrils breathing fire, to punish Minos sent by Neptune's ire, roams wild in vengeance through his wide domains, and death and terror spreads over Crete's fair plains. But soon the bellowing beast alive he caught, and vainly struggling to Eurystheus brought. The seventh labor he enjoined on him was to bring the Cretan bull. Acusilus says that this was the bull that ferried across Europa for Zeus. But some say it was the bull that Poseidon sent up from the sea when Minos promised to sacrifice to Poseidon what should appear out of the sea. And they say that when he saw the beauty of the bull, he sent it away to the herds and sacrificed another to Poseidon, at which the god was angry and made the bull savage. To attack this bull, Hercules came to Crete, and when, in reply to his request for aid, Minos told him to fight and catch the bull for himself, he caught it and brought it to Eurystheus, and having shown it to him, he let it afterwards go free. But the bull roamed to Sparta and all Arcadia, and traversing the isthmus arrived at Marathon in Attica, and harried the inhabitants. The eighth labor, Diomedes and his horses. Fell Diomede, whose horse is fat with gore, his subjects' bodies in their mangers tore. He next overthrew, and as old authors say, the tyrant gave to his own steeds a prey. On Mount Olympus rent by savage beasts, no more the horses make on man their horrid feasts. The eighth labor he enjoined on him was to bring the mares of Diomedes, the Thracian, to Mycenae. Now this Diomedes was a son of Ares and Cyrene, and he was king of the Bistones, a very warlike Thracian people, and he owned man-eating mares. So Hercules sailed with a band of volunteers, and having empowered the grooms who were in charge of the mangers, he drove the mares to the sea. When the Bistones in arms came to the rescue, he committed the mares to the guardianship of Abderus, who was a son of Hermes, a native of Opus in Locris, and a minion of Hercules. But the mares killed him by dragging him after them. But Hercules fought against the Bistones, slew Diomedes, and compelled the rest to flee. And he founded a city, Abdera, beside the grave of Abderus, who had been done to death. And bringing the mares, he gave them to Eurystheus. But Eurystheus let them go, and they came to Mount Olympus, as it is called, and there they were destroyed by wild beasts. The ninth labor, the Amazon Hippolyte. By fate constrained Eurystheus to obey, the matchless hero now must bend his way to gain the golden girdle which adorns the queen of Amazons, who proudly scorns to yield, and in her warriors doth confide, but vanquished she becomes great Theseus' bride. The ninth labor he enjoined on Hercules was to bring the belt of Hippolyte. She was queen of the Amazons who dwelt about the river Thermodon, a people great in war, for they cultivated the manly virtues And if ever they gave birth to children through intercourse with the other sex, they reared the females, and they pinched off the breasts, that they might not be trammeled by them in throwing the javelin, but they kept the left breast, that they might suckle. Now Hippolyte had the belt of Ares in token of her superiority to all the rest. Hercules was sent to fetch this belt because Admete, daughter of Eurystheus, desired to get it. So taking with him a band of volunteer comrades in a single ship, he set sail and put in to the island of Paros, which was inhabited by the sons of Minos, to wit, Eurymedon, Chryses, Nephalion, and Philolaus. But it chanced that 2 of those in the ship landed and were killed by the sons of Minos. Indignant at this, Hercules killed the sons of Minos on the spot and besieged the rest closely, till they sent envoys to request that in the room of the murdered men he would take 2 whom he pleased. So he raised the siege, and taking on board the sons of Androgeus, son of Minos, to wit, Alcaeus and Sthenelus, he came to Mysia, to the court of Lycus, son of Dicelus, and was entertained by him. And in a battle between him and the king of Bebryces, Hercules sided with Lycus and slew many, amongst others King Mygdon, brother of Amycus. And he took much land from Bebryces and gave it to Lycus, who called it all Heraclea. Having put in at the harbor of Themyscira, he received a visit from Hippolyte, who inquired why he has come, and promised to give him the belt. But Hera, in the likeness of an Amazon, went up and down the multitude, saying that the strangers who had arrived were carrying off the queen. So the Amazons in arms charged on horseback down on the ship. But when Hercules saw them in arms, he suspected treachery, and killing Hippolyte, stripped her of her belt. And after fighting the rest, he sailed away and touched at Troy. But it chanced that the city was then in distress, consequently on the wrath of Apollo and Poseidon. For desiring to put the wantonness of Laomedon to the proof, Apollo and Poseidon assumed the likeness of men and undertook to fortify Pergamum for wages. But when they had fortified it, he would not pay them their wages. Therefore Apollo sent a pestilence, and Poseidon a sea monster, which, carried up by a flood, snatched away the people of the plain. But as oracles foretold deliverance from these calamities if Laomedon would expose his daughter Hesione to be devoured by the sea monster, he exposed her by fastening her to the rocks near the sea. Seeing her exposed, Hercules promised to save her on condition of receiving from Laomedon the mares which Zeus had given in compensation for the rape of Ganymede. On Laomedon's saying that he would give them, Hercules killed the monster and saved Hesione. But when Laomedon would not give the stipulated reward, Hercules put to sea after threatening to make war on Troy. And he touched at Aenus, where he was entertained by Poltus. And as he was sailing away, he shot and killed on the Aenean beach a lewd fellow, Sarpedon, son of Poseidon and brother of Poltus. And having come to Thasos and subjugated the Thracians who dwelt in the island, he gave it to the sons of Androgeus to dwell in. From Thasos he proceeded to Torone, and there, being challenged to wrestle by Polygonus and Telegonus, sons of Proteus, son of Poseidon, he killed them in the wrestling match. And having brought the belt to Mycenae, he gave it to Eurystheus. The 10th labor. Geryon. A giant king in Gades once did keep, unlike their gentle race, carnivorous sheep. The triple monster slain, amidst his rocks, he left to birds of prey, and seized his flocks, which by Eurystheus' order brought away, he unto Argos safely did convey. As a 10th labor, he was ordered to fetch the kine of Geryon from Erythia. Now Erythia was an island near the ocean. It is now called Gadira. This island was inhabited by Geryon, son of Chrysor, by Caleroi, daughter of Ocean. He had the body of 3 men grown together and joined in one at the waist, but parted in 3 from the flanks and thighs. He owned red kine, of which Erymanthian was herdsman, and Orthus, the 2-headed hound, begotten by Typhon and Echidna, was the watchdog. So, journeying through Europe to fetch the kine of Geryon, he destroyed many wild beasts and set foot in Libya. And proceeding from Tartessus, he erected as tokens of his journey 2 pillars over against each other at the boundaries of Europe and Libya. But being heated by the sun on his journey, he bent his bow at the god, who in admiration of his hardihood gave him a golden goblet in which he crossed the ocean. And having reached Erythia, he lodged on Mount Abas. However, the dog, perceiving him, rushed at him, but he smote it with his club. And when the herdsman Erymanthian came to the help the dog, Hercules killed him also. But Mænalæan, who was there pasturing the kine of Hades, reported to Geryon what had occurred, and he, coming up with Hercules beside the river Anthemus, as he was driving away the kine, joined battle with him and was shot dead. And Hercules, embarking the kine in the goblet and sailing across the Tartessus, gave back the goblet to the sun. And passing through Abderia, he came to Liguria, where Lalabion and Dersinus, sons of Poseidon, attempted to rob him of the kine, but he killed them, and went on his way through Tyrrhenia. But at Rhegium a bull broke away, and hastily plunging into the sea, swam across to Sicily, and having passed through the neighboring country, since called Italy after it, for the Tyrrhenians called the bull Italus, came to the plain of Eryx, who reigned over Elyme. Now Eryx was a son of Poseidon, and he mingled the bull with his own herds. So Hercules entrusted the kine to Hephaestus, and hurried away in search of the bull. He found it in the herds of Eryx, and when the king refused to surrender it unless Hercules should beat him in a wrestling bout, Hercules beat him thrice, killed him in the wrestling, and taking the bull, drove it with the rest of the herd to the Ionian Sea. But when he came to the creeks of the sea, Hera afflicted the cows with a gadfly, and they dispersed among the skirts of the mountains of Thrace. Hercules went in pursuit, and having caught some, drove them to the Hellespont, but the remainder were thenceforth wild. Having with difficulty collected the cows, Hercules blamed the river Strymon, and whereas it had been navigable before, he made it unnavigable by filling it with rocks. And he conveyed the kine and gave them to Eurystheus, who sacrificed them to Hera. The 11th labor, Cerberus. In fetters Hercules fierce Cerberus tied, and took him trembling from grim Pluto's side. From realms of darkness dragged away to light, the yelling monster sickened at the sight, and from his jaws the foam which fell to earth, unto the poisonous aconite gave birth. The next labor imposed on Hercules was to bring Cerberus from Hades. Now this Cerberus had 3 head of dogs, the tail of a dragon, and on his back the heads of all sorts of snakes. When Hercules was about to fetch him, he went to Eumolpus at Eleusis, wishing to be initiated. However, it was not then lawful for foreigners to be initiated, since he proposed to be initiated as the adoptive son of Peleus. but not being able to see the mysteries because he had not been cleansed of the slaughter of the centaurs, he was cleansed by Eumolpus and then initiated. And having come to Tenarum to Laconia, where is the mouth of the descent to Hades, he descended through it. But when the souls saw him, they fled, save Meleager and the Gorgon Medusa. And Hercules drew his sword against the Gorgon as if she were alive. But he learned from Hermes that she was an empty phantom. And being come near to the gates of Hades, he found Theseus and Pirithous, him who wooed Persephone, in wedlock, and was therefore bound fast. And when they beheld Hercules, they stretched out their hands as if they should be raised from the dead by his might. And Theseus, indeed, he took by the hand and raised up, but when he would have brought up Pirithous, the earth quaked and he let go. And he rolled away also the stone of Ascalaphus, and wishing to provide the souls with blood, he slaughtered one of the kind of Hades. But Minuets, son of Cothamus, who tended the king, challenged Hercules to wrestle, and being seized round the middle, had his ribs broken. Howbeit, he was led off at the request of Persephone. When Hercules asked Pluto for Cerberus, Pluto ordered him to take the animal, provided he mastered him without the use of the weapons which he carried. Hercules found him at the gates of Acheron, and cased in his cuirass and covered by the lion's skin, he flung his arms around the head of the brute. And though the dragon in its tail bit him, he never relaxed his grip and pressure till it yielded. So he carried it off and ascended through Troezen. But Demeter turned Ascalaphus into a short-eared owl, and Hercules, after showing Cerberus to Eurystheus, carried him back to Hades. The 12th labor, the Hesperides. To crown his deeds, so wondrous and so great, upon his shoulders vast Olympus weight he bore, while Atlas did the apples bring, which bridal Juno gave to heaven's dread king. And now the dragon guarded apples won, the godlike hero saw his labors done. Eurystheus ordered Hercules to fetch golden apples from the Hesperides, for he did not acknowledge the labor of the cattle of Augeas, nor that of the Hydra. These apples were not, as some have said, in Libya, but on Atlas among the Hyperboreans. They were presented by Earth to Zeus after his marriage with Hera, and guarded by an immortal dragon with 100 heads, offspring of Typhon and Echidna, which spoke with many and diverse sorts of voices. With it the Hesperides also were on guard, to wit, Aegle, Erythea, Hesperia, and Arethusa. So journeying he came to the river Ectorus, and Ignis, son of Ares and Pyrene, challenged him to single combat. Ares championed the cause of Cygnus and marshaled the combat, but a thunderbolt was hurled between the two and parted the combatants. And going on foot through Illyria and hastening to the river Eridanus, he came to the nymphs, the daughters of Zeus and Themis. They revealed Nerus to him, and Hercules seized him while he slept. And though the god turned himself into all kinds of shapes, the hero bound him and did not release him till he learned from him where were the apples and the Hesperides. Being informed, he traversed Libya. That country was then ruled by Antius, son of Poseidon, who used to kill strangers by forcing them to wrestle. Being forced to wrestle with him, Hercules hugged him, lifted him aloft, broke and killed him. For when he touched earth, so it was that he waxed stronger, wherefore some said that this was a son of earth. After Libya, he traversed Egypt. That country was then ruled by Busiris, a son of Poseidon by Lysianassa, daughter of Epiphus. This Osiris used to sacrifice strangers on an altar of Zeus in accordance with a certain oracle. For Egypt was visited with death for 9 years, and Phrasius, a learned seer who had come from Cyprus, said that the death would cease if they slaughtered a stranger man in honor of Zeus every year. Osiris began by slaughtering the seer himself, and continued to slaughter the strangers who landed. Sir Hercules also was seized and haled to the altars, but he burst his bonds and slew both Osiris and his son Amphidamas. And traversing Asia, he put into Thermidrae, the harbor of Lydians. And having loosed one of the bullocks from the cart of a cowherd, he sacrificed it and feasted. But the cowherd, unable to protect himself, stood on a certain mountain and cursed. Wherefore to this day, when they sacrifice to Hercules, they do it with curses. And passing by Arabia, he slew Erymanthian, son of Tithonus, and journeying through Libya to the outer sea, he received the goblet from the sun. And having crossed to the opposite mainland, he shot on the Caucasus the eagle, offspring of Echidna and Typhon, that was devouring the liver of Prometheus, and he released Prometheus, after choosing for himself the bond of olive. And to Zeus he presented Chiron, who, though immortal, consented to die in his stead. Now Prometheus had told Hercules not to go himself after the apples, but to send Atlas, first relieving him of the burden of the sphere. So when he was come to Atlas, in the land of Hyperboreans, he took the advice and relieved Atlas. But when Atlas had received 3 apples from the Hesperides, he came to Hercules, and not wishing to support the sphere, he said that he would himself carry the apples to Eurystheus, and bade Hercules hold up the sky in his stead. Hercules promised to do so, but succeeded by craft in putting it on Atlas instead. For at the advice of Prometheus he begged Atlas to hold up the sky till he should put a pad on his head. When Atlas heard that, he laid the apples down on the ground and took the sphere from Hercules. And so Hercules picked up the apples and departed. But some say that he did not get them from Atlas, but that he plucked the apples himself after killing the guardian snake. And having brought the apples, he gave them to Eurystheus. But he, on receiving them, bestowed them on Hercules, from whom Athena got them and conveyed them back again. For it was not lawful that they should be laid down anywhere. Having completed the labors, Hercules was free, but went on to perform other noteworthy feats. And after his death, as a reward for his heroic deeds, Hercules was welcomed into Mount Olympus, a demigod. And now we have reached the end of the reading of the 12 Labors of Hercules. We must get back into our time travel and return. But before we do, we have a couple questions. Maybe you can leave me a comment. What are your thoughts on this? Should a child have to pay for the consequences and misgivings of the father? Those mistakes that parents do? Should that happen? Anyway, wonder what would have happened if Hera would have not gotten so angry with Zeus and taken it out on poor Hercules. Please do leave me a comment, hit the like button, share this with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Until the next time, at the next video, on this channel, wherever it may be. Be blessed.